one of the things I don't understand about the modern Super Bowl is how hard people are on the halftime show. Try to get 110 million people to agree on one concert to go to.
The beautiful thing in the modern world we live in is there are options that you don't have to watch it. I mean, go listen to Up with People and see if you can make it 5 seconds.
It's the same conversation as the commercials. Like some people will watch
Right.
for the commercials, some will watch for the halftime show.
Right.
Most are watching for the game of football. Yeah, it's another season.
That's right.
And we get to dive right back into it.
Good to be back.
It is Mr. Doug Marsh alongside Rob Stott here on the Twisted Eras podcast, season 4. And really our second year of doing this podcast. And we're kicking it off in dramatic fashion. And I say kicking it off. I mean, maybe that's pretty apropos of what we're doing. I should add that.
That's right.
We'll add
That's
that
good.
sound effect in.
That's a good drop.
It is with a topic that it's going to hit. It is hitting very close to home for one of us right now, and that's the Super Bowl. I mean,
Super
we're
Bowl
talking
Sunday,
early February. It's changed over time, right? It used to be late
Yes.
January. It used to be early January. Then it was late January. Now we're early February. Before
Pretty soon
we
it's
know
gonna
it,
be
we could
President's
talking,
Day
right,
weekend.
like
Yeah.
late February.
Yeah.
Talk of an 18. So, have you seen any of the Jason Kelsey talk show that he's been doing for ESPN?
I have not.
He's got this new show he started. I tried to get tickets to it. I applied. It's
Oh,
being recorded
gotcha.
in Philly.
Nice.
And it's like the reason you probably haven't seen it is because it airs. To be fair, it re-airs on YouTube, but it officially goes on air at 1 a.m. on Friday night, well, Saturday morning.
That's a plum
right?
time, right?
So,
yeah,
prime time.
Yeah. That was when Friends and Seinfeld were on too, right?
Right. I
Yeah,
think
1 o'clock in the morning.
That would be like the late show with Jason Kelsey. Is effectively what it is.
Gotcha.
But he had Roger Goodell on a couple weeks ago, and the question got posed, and I forget who his other guests were. Like Chad Ochocinco was there, and he's had some really great conversations. The clips of it are awesome, but he was talking about the 17 game season, and are there talks about going to 18, and what would that be? You know, moving whether it's a later season or removing a preseason game or eliminating the preseason altogether. And that came up, and I have to imagine if they keep adding games, the season's going to get later and later. So we could be saying March Super Bowl. Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, like it's funny if those games you go back and watch the early Super Bowls and it's January 17th, and I'm pretty sure I believe the NFL started on Labor Day weekend back then too. And now they give Labor Day weekend to the colleges. So you have college football on Monday night of Labor Day. But back in the day, Labor Day weekend was just football kickoff, college, pro, the works.
There was no week 0, right?
Right. So they lose that week as well. They push it back. Now they start on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it is, but it's the following week. And so that's another week. So I know they never go backwards, but in theory, if you went to 18 and you wanted to keep it that middle, you could start a week early. I don't even think they play preseason games that weekend anymore either. They try to end up by Wednesday so they can cut and all that good stuff. And
they were part of the discussion too, because I think all of us feel like preseason games at this point are just useless. The players that were on there, I think. Andrew Whitworth might have been part of the discussion too, but they were talking about how they do those mixed. They've been doing them for a while now, but those mixed practices between teams that end up being a preseason game, right? But they get more out of like the live drills and running through situational football and practicing things against another team.
Right.
They get more out of that type of practice than they do actual preseason games. So
sure,
you could have more of that maybe in the run up to the start of a regular season. But I mean, with the lack of starters playing in the preseason anyway, those early games of the year become effectively your preseason as it is. So, they're knocking the rust off. And At that point, just start the freaking season
Go ahead
with
and
the
make it
first game
count.
and let's go. Like but
I mean, let's be honest. That by the time we get to the Super Bowl, these teams are not going to look the same anyway.
no,
If
no,
you had a 14 game season, it wouldn't look the same because their injuries are just such a part of this sport. And so,
yeah, the
but
Detroit Lions would tell you that much.
oh my goodness,
What, forget they went into their divisional round with like 31 starters on IR or something
it's
like 31.
ridiculous.
I'm sorry, not starters, but players on IR, and it was just unbelievable. So a whole lot can happen during a season. So
It's
removing those
very
meaningless games and having them matter, I think is
so.
a thing.
I'm just going to point out something very interesting is that we have started our new season and we're going to be highlighting the Super Bowl. And you just mentioned a team who, ironically, has never been to the Super Bowl before.
One of the last, if I'm right, right? They might be
Yeah,
the only.
no,
No, Cleveland's on there.
there's another
Um,
one.
Cleveland,
That's our
them,
trivia question,
yeah, right.
everybody.
Cleveland,
What
Detroit.
are
Hold on,
yeah? But
AFC
those
or
two are
NFC?
original
Yeah,
teams from
right,
like the 30s, you know.
right, right,
So
right. So, well, someone more
yes,
recent.
yeah.
Jacksonville? No,
Jacksonville's
yeah,
never
Jacksonville.
been. Yep.
And so how many? What are there? Four?
Still one more.
Still one more. So I got Cleveland, Jacksonville, Detroit,
Yep. This
Minnesota.
is
No,
no.
no, no,
So
no, no. You
Minnesota's
no, 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 no,
Minnesota
no.
went to four in the first
Early
11.
on. That's
So
right. That's
yeah,
right. Well, who am I missing? NFC or AFC?
it's you're asking the wrong guy. I think it's AFC, but they're an expansion team as well.
San Diego?
Nope.
No. Chargers? No. Well,
No,
they
a
would have been.
modern
Well,
expansion team. It's
okay.
probably the last team
Oh,
to
Houston?
ding ding
Ding,
ding
there
ding
we go.
ding.
Done.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Which, they've had some shots of late, but we got there.
Yeah.
We got there. All
Yeah.
right. I'm not terrible. Thanks for the
No,
help.
no, you did well. The Cleveland and
Yeah.
Detroit ones are the crazy ones because they've
Right.
been in there forever.
Well,
You know,
they have been. You look at the way one of my
and
favorite memes
fair.
about Cleveland is
Yeah,
that guy that has the number 2 jersey with every name duct taped
yeah,
replacing the
that's
previous
true.
quarterback. So like there's been some towns
To
that
be fair, that technically the Cleveland lineage has been to the Super Bowl.
Baltimore, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
Baltimore. Yes, so that's fair. So that's a Cleveland expansion team that we have now. That is not the original Browns
Right.
who have been to the Super Bowl. The Detroit has been there forever and has not made it. So that one is still, yeah, legit. Like,
Could you, well, then in that theory, in that regard, you could also say that Houston has been because they carried their lineage to Tennessee, which then the Oilers
that
and
that would
Titans,
be the Oilers. The Oilers
yeah,
have nothing to do
with
with
the
the Texans.
Texans. Yeah,
Yes.
the city,
Yes.
the franchise, yes. Yeah, no, nothing there. But what a game, though.
Yes.
We like this game entering its 59th rendition or edition.
Yep.
Do we talk about this one or do we talk about the history? How
I
when
think
when
I
do we
think
dive into it? I'll let you
it
guide this because I
no,
I may be a little biased.
you are, but I would say it's a fun way to start. Like, we love eras, right? So a little bit of the historical
Hmm.
background is, the first one I believe is the 66 season, maybe 67 is the actual
Yep.
January of 67 is when the first one is. And it was, it's hard to describe today, but it would almost be like MLB having, the Dodgers winning the World Series and then the AAA franchise going, "Hey, we're going to play you for a championship."
Right.
That's what they
It's
thought,
effectively what
and
it was.
they were wrong. There was
Yeah.
tons of talent in the AFL. They just they looked down on them,
Yep.
and so. But to be fair, in that first one, that Packer team was legendary. Had gone on like a 10-year run of championships, and they just destroyed
Yeah.
Cleveland. It's close early, but I believe, and then they destroy the Raiders the next year to end. Like that's essentially when it stops.
Yep.
That's I think Lombardi retires after
Oh.
that, and all that good stuff. But
Almost. Well, he does, but doesn't he come back with Washington, but
he
and
does. But
passes away?
He retires to Green Bay at that point in
Yeah.
time. But
Yeah.
he does have a little comeback. Yeah.
Um, but so one of my favorite statistics about him, he's got one championship game loss. Do you know what it is and when it is?
I'm going to say 1960 when the Philadelphia Eagles got him.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The
Because
only team.
you only got the one before
Right.
What is it? What was
Well,
the?
we had three NFL championships,
You
47,
did.
48, and
Gotcha.
1960. And then
Gotcha.
nothing until, we
Till
had some
the Philly
appearances
special.
but the Philly special is the one
Till the
that
Philly
brought
special.
it home. Nick Foles
Yeah.
will, that man will, him and Doug
That's
Peterson, no matter what, they
yeah.
were, you talk about some individuals that they went anywhere else in their careers and it was garbage, but they
Yeah.
thrived in Philly. you know, those two men will never have to pay for a drink in this city ever again. So,
Absolutely not. But I mean, so that's a good, it starts off in a very
yeah.
simple way with these two leagues and eventually they would come together. But for giggles, what is your first memory of the Super Bowl?
Um, I, so the 30, like within the 30s, not 1930s to be clear. Nothing was going NFL
Whoa.
championships. I don't even know if they
You in the time
possibly were
machine?
happening
Yeah.
around then. Super Bowl, I think it would be 31. It was the Packers and Patriots.
Yep.
Is an early one for me. Probably the earliest. I remember watching the games. So my grandfather, in our mall, in our neighborhood, the Willow Grove Mall. We had a family. This is maybe the most cliche sounding thing ever. We had a cheesesteak shop. That we owned. It
Yes.
was called Luigi's Steakhouse.
Yes.
And he ran it with his brother, and it was like a family business type deal. And they had a location outside of the mall. That I actually have some of my old Little League jerseys that he was the sponsor on the front. That was a
It's
Luigi's
amazing.
Steakhouse with my name on the back. It's
Yes.
so good. But it was the basically like within the food court of the mall, the anchor of the
Hmm.
food court. And so it had like seating around the back and TVs inside. I remember watching that Super Bowl in the steak our Luigi Steakhouse and watching it there and seeing the Packers beat the Patriots
Hmm.
in that Super Bowl. And I have an interesting tie to that Super Bowl because my neighbor growing up, I come to find out her daughter was married or eventually did marry Marco Rivera, who was a famous, lineman for the Packers, ends up playing for the Cowboys, whatnot. But they hosted their bridal shower or like wedding shower something at their house, at my neighbor's house. So he comes over and has like a party with a whole bunch of his friends, and I have this football with signed by names that I don't even know, like
Right.
guys that he was close with, some kicker from Detroit at the time. Like I don't even couldn't tell you half the names on the football, but I brought one over. They were all signing it, and then he comes around every so often. I have this like really embarrassing. I'm not going to show it, or if I do, I'm going to crop it. This picture of me sitting in a chair in a backyard holding the Super Bowl ring from that Super Bowl. So that's one of the early moments of me, knowing that Super Bowl, but then also having like a personal tie to it. That's kind of cool. Actually, what I will and can show is a picture to prove that, this is a real thing. I have a photograph of him, like one of his, just like I guess player shots or whatever.
Yeah.
Signed and addressed out to me that hangs on my wall down in the man cave. So, cool little connection to someone tied to that Super Bowl as well.
That's awesome. So 31, I believe, is in New Orleans. It was Green Bay's first trip back. It's Brett
Hmm.
Favre, who is, would go on to dominate the league.
Yep.
He just wouldn't win anymore.
Right. Right. Which is
Yes,
wild.
it is wild to even think about, with the whole, Madden, Brett Favre, and
Hmm.
all that stuff. But yeah, 31, I believe, he almost maybe even threw a touchdown pass in the first play from scrimmage or something crazy like that. He
Unbelievable.
runs around with his helmet off because you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's just it's so funny, man. And I'm going to get into this later, but I think we remember these things because the genius of the Sables and
Yeah.
NFL films and NFL
Oh,
allowing
absolutely.
them to do this. And I, it's you, Sonny. You mentioned 31, and 31's about when I start. I don't want to say losing interest. I just don't
Hmm.
know as much about modern Super Bowls, but I can go pretty much so for the first 30, 31. I could tell you who was in it, who
Right.
won, all that good stuff. And a lot of it is because of NFL films. And the slow mo and the
Mm.
symphony music. And by that point in time, John Facenda was dead. But when you go back to those first, I want to say 10, you've got the great John Facenda and
Well,
his,
then who picks up the
you know,
mantle?
yeah.
Who picks up his mantle and runs with it?
Who goes now?
No, like after him with the NFL films. Do you remember some of the
Well,
other voices?
I don't offhand now. Callis, your boy
Yeah,
Harry Callis did
that's who I'm
he
thinking
did the
of.
local he did
Yeah,
the
yeah.
weekly show, but I'm not sure he did like
I
the Super Bowls. I'm
yeah,
just not
yeah. That's
sure,
fair.
but
I just remember
no, he's
watching
got an
him like take
iconic voice as well. He's
the
not
0 and 16.
Facenda.
He's like
Yeah.
just the way they could make the 0 and 16 like
Yes.
Lions season seem like they
Yes.
had hope at any
But
point.
yeah,
It was
the
incredible.
weekly, it was on HBO. It was
Yeah.
Inside the NFL. He
Yeah.
was the
Yep.
voice of Inside the NFL. Harry Callis was. Just both Philadelphia guys. I believe. I think
That's
Facenda
right.
was
That's
like
right.
a news guy or something
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Philly or
Oh
something like
man.
that. But anyway, they just did this amazing job of making it
Immortalizing it?
big
Like
and bigger than
yeah.
it was. This and like for first and foremost, I'm going to tell you, I'm a baseball guy, but they did not have the wherewithal to put these things together with great voiceovers and symphony orchestras and these sounds and just oh my gosh.
It just like
And
it romanticized the game.
it absolutely does. And Ed Sable, Steve ran the company more, and he's passed as well, but his father is got who started all this. And he had said something, I'm gonna get this quote wrong, but it was like he wanted to make the memory of the actual event bigger than the event. It's like you remember the memories as opposed to the event. And it's like I remember Brett Favre in slow mo running this joy with his helmet in his head. Yeah, you remember those. And so you can't sit here and
The hair
really
flowing.
dive. Oh, it was amazing. And dive in to the Super Bowl without thinking about NFL
Mhm.
films because I had it was called. That's the most amazing thing about the time we live in. You can't sit. You have no clue how good you have it here. But everything that I grew up with, I would have to have on VHS or whatever. It's out there on YouTube. So it was called Super Sunday, and essentially what NFL Films does, and I imagine they still do it today, is they cut every Super Bowl down into a 30-minute highlight show.
Hmm.
Now, granted, it's 24 minutes because of commercials, but
Mhm.
um, and on Super Sunday, ESPN would show them all in order. Now, let's
Oh,
say in 1985 or whatever, we were at Super Bowl 20,
right.
or
Yep.
you went back.
19
Yeah, you went,
or 85
86
season.
85
86.
season,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
86,
20. Yep.
and so you would show the first 19 and they would put, so like 6 o'clock in the morning, one would come on and I would get up at 6 to watch one and then
So
two would
strange.
follow and three, and you could watch all these and it was amazing. And I had what was called
You were binging the Super Bowl.
I was
Like, very,
binging the Super Bowl,
that's so
but I
good.
had Super Sunday was what I had, and it was a VHS. I think it was maybe 90-minute version. So it was a cut version. So as opposed to being the full 25 minutes, it may be 5 minutes. But it was like on each one, and it was the
Hmm.
exact same thing. It was the same, it was the announcing was the same. It was incredible. And I had that thing, and it was through the first 22 because
Wow.
Washington routes Denver in 22. And I watched that tape over and over and over again. And they remade it a few times. So if you see it on YouTube, it's further along than what I had.
That's so good.
But yeah, so that's like that I associate the Super Bowl with NFL films, And it's like funny that you mentioned 31. If I go back to younger, what is my first
Right.
Super Bowl memory? And it's so stupid. And like the Steelers for my generation, if the essentially 50 to 65-year olds, the Steelers are everywhere. The
Right.
Steeler fans are everywhere because when they were kids, the Steelers were really, really good.
Hmm.
I have I have no ties to Pittsburgh. I have no ties to Pennsylvania. I have no ties up there at all. But I got something. It wasn't in a cereal box, but you would get prizes, and when you were a kid, you buy something, and I had one of these Pittsburgh stickers or whatever. And I was like, oh, so that's my team because we had no team here in North Carolina. And randomly, it was the best team of the '70s, and
Hmm.
so I started pulling. for Pittsburgh, not knowing what that even means at six
Right.
years old, but you just so in the 80, what is that? 79 season 80
Hmm.
Super Bowl, I think is their fourth one over the Rams.
Hmm.
That's the first one I remember. My parents had a little cookout, and I would come in from time to time. Hey, what's the score? It's 31-19, I think is the final, but it's closer than that. It's one of those that you look back on.
It shocks me. Like,
And yeah,
I
yeah,
hope people recognize, and not to like cut you off. You need to finish your story, but like I don't know if it's photographic or just like how much you watched those videos, but like you are every detail you're
it's
recounting is spot
it's
on.
it's crazy. If
Yeah.
Jeopardy ever had a Super Bowl, first 25 Super Bowl edition, I think I could do well. But no, but like when you see that score, you're like, that's a blowout, and it really was. It was a closer game. That was the Rams.
Hmm.
They had one. I think they may even been like a wild card team, and they shouldn't have been there. But anyway, that Super Bowl was the first one I remember. They win the four. There's a great video of Terry at they scored to go up that big, but what jumped out at then, they had these amazing characters. When you look back at the Pittsburgh, the Steel Curtain and
Yeah.
Swanee and
Joe
Stallworth and
Green.
and
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And so today the Super Bowl is essentially a an ad campaign for, marketing companies. And it kind of starts in that one because Coke had put together an ad with Mean Joe Green.
Yeah. The jersey, right?
The jersey,
Yeah.
yes. And so the ad, we can put it up here, but it was simply he was hurt
Hmm.
and he's limping out and he's in the tunnel and he doesn't have his jersey on and this kid essentially is like, "Hey, are you okay?" "Yeah, don't bother me, kid." And the kid finally goes, "Well, you can have my Coke, Mr. Green." And he kills the whole thing and he throws him the jersey. And it's this iconic thing and once again, not making this up, but
Hmm.
I have the jersey.
Get out of here. It's incredible.
So it had like
Yep. Mean Joe
yeah,
Green on the back. Yeah.
it means you. It's got the Coke ad
Yeah.
here. Mean
That's
Joe Green
awesome.
on the back. Look at this little guy.
That's
It-
so good.
Is that not incredible?
That is.
I
That is
can't
awesome.
believe my parents saved this because it is filthy. Because like I was 7. It's got. I'm pretty sure this is fruit
Terrible towel,
punch.
that thing.
Hey, I've got one of those right there
Yeah.
too. But it's got fruit punch stains on it. It's got dirt
Wow.
stains on it. But they gosh, it's been a couple years. Like, hey, we found your Mean Joe Green jersey. Would you like it? Yes.
Yeah. Now, so you mentioning commercials makes me want to go down that path
Yeah.
of that's one of the more iconic and probably to your point, one of the first
Hmm.
um most iconic. You know, are there any
Specifically
others
for
that
that,
are there any others that stand out to you over time?
everybody talks about the Apple one, but I think that game was a blowout. I do not remember watching that thing live. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
mean, I know I've seen it since, but it's because of YouTube and stuff like that. But what I remember as a kid, and this is funny that it was as a kid, was the money that Budweiser would spend in the mid '80s on the Bud Bowl,
Right.
where they would literally have these fake football games with Budweiser and Bud Light, Bud Dry, and Bud whatever, and you would keep up. And if you had a ticket that had the final score, you could send it in for Bud gear. And we're like in the 6th and 7th grade, and us kids are just like, "This is the greatest thing ever." It was like,
For beer.
yes, and it was
Right.
for beer. And I'm like,
Hmm.
would that pass today? And I'm not saying that, we obviously have a different view of alcohol today, but would you just like, oh yeah, we love the kids hanging out watching the beer ads and sending off for beer gear so they could wear it at junior high?
Man, that's
I just,
incredible.
but those are the ones that stand out to me because,
Yeah.
it's funny. The bumpers or 40s or whatever you want to call it, that would be the guy that would come in and nobody could stop him because the little pony bottles were like, oh my
Right.
gosh, I was like, this is genius, man. But
I mean
those are the ones that stand out to me.
the alcohol ones, right? So the beer
Yeah,
ones. Like I think of, the Clydesdales are iconic, of
sure.
course.
Still,
They still try to do something every year, it seems
yeah.
like with those. But like I think back to some of the like the Wazza, like that started with a beer commercial. I'm pretty sure Budweiser.
Yeah.
And then it was like the frogs, the
The frog.
Budweiser, like those guys.
Yes.
So like those were just they had some of the you could think maybe the madmen that were involved in the creation of
Yeah.
those campaigns, but like they were the ones that stand out and probably had some of the biggest cultural impacts at the time too, because everyone was going around saying was and like that all that sort of stuff, and that leaked into wrestling. Like I don't know if
Did it
anyone
really?
remembers the Dudley Boys, Devon and Bubba Ray Dudley, had this move that they would do with it was a tag team move, but um, it was something where they would have the guy on the ground and Bubba Ray would be there holding his legs like this, and Devon would be up on the top rope, and they'd go what that, and then Devon would do a face dive right at the guy. So it was just, that was a move, and
But
it was
what?
a thing.
It's funny
Like,
that you mentioned that because like it's in the pile of The Office too, and it's way
yeah.
past its prime.
Oh my
But you
God,
have a
yeah.
whole generation of young kids who
Don't know what
probably
that is.
have no clue what that is, but they
Yep.
know Michael did it in the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Jimmy even goes, "Are people still saying that?"
So good. Like, this
But
is
yeah,
so
you're right.
good.
I mean, it's like, and then you get to the point where it transitions into anybody, like, hey, we're gonna put our movie out. So voila, this
Right.
is where we put our movies out, and this is where we push product. Like
Yeah.
the whole .com boom and bust
Oh.
is a lot of that is surrounded by these random companies
Mm-hmm.
spending way too much money
which
for
which we'll get into.
yeah.
I think of also too just the amount of celebrity appearances in ads, and oh man, her name's gonna slip my mind, but the is it Diet Pepsi or like what Pepsi commercial with the female
Cindy,
actress that is it Cindy
Cindy Crawford.
Crawford? Yeah. So like
That's
goes and gets it out of the machine at the gas station and drinks it, and
yeah.
um those just like you think of some of the other
Oh
cameos that happen and things like that in these commercials. It's just
no, it's
wild.
awesome. Like I much more of a NASCAR fan than anything, and I want to say Dale Jr. talked about he had a few Super Bowl commercials, and he
Yeah.
talked about one he had done. It was essentially a designated driver commercial where he's cruising around,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he goes,
That's
"It's
right.
funny." He goes, "If you go back and watch." Who I'm driving around is Ed Helms. And it was like a
Oh,
big deal that Ed
that's
Helms
so
had
awesome.
gotten this role, because he was still, struggling stand up at the time. And he gets
Wow.
this national Budweiser ad. And it was him, he's like driving him home. And he's like, "Oh, how do you get to your house?" And he goes, "Well, you turn right here." And it's because he's going by all his friends because he's
Yeah.
driving around with Dale Earnhardt Jr. And I was like, "This is an amazing ad." So he's like, you have all these,
Yeah.
it's great,
And then there's like the cringy ones. I think of Danica Patrick with all the GoDaddy ads and what they had her do, and
Yeah.
like that put her on the map, and then she ends up in racing. It's like
Yes.
that's a little bit different. But like that, I think that may to most people, other than dating Aaron Rodgers, those commercials might be what she's known for. You know,
Man. Yeah.
it's just which is unfortunate, but like that's what advertisers or these companies want to try to make their mark, and
They do. And
they do what they want
like I
or what they
like I
can.
like I was saying, I know the first 30, 31 very well, but the modern ones I don't, and I think that's part of it
Yeah.
because it has literally shifted from
Well,
a game to a cultural event.
yeah, because half of the talk is about, how many people are just watching for the commercials, right? How often do you hear that every year? And it's a talking point, and rightfully so for those that actually do it, I guess, because they are such a big deal.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's like it's unfortunate because there is a game that still needs to be played. Um,
Yes.
but to the point, before we move on from ads, the average cost of 30 seconds during the first Super Bowl. Do you want to take a stab at what it was? And then we'll talk about today.
Is it 50 grand maybe?
It's lower.
It's lower. It was 10
$37,500 for 30 seconds during Super Bowl
Super Bowl.
one.
So what's the difference with Super Bowl one though? It has a glowing difference. See, Super Bowl one is there's something special about the ads in Super Bowl one that is no other Super Bowl. Can you give me that one?
Probably not.
It's
No.
on two networks.
Oh, well, yeah. Actually, now that I look at it, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm
The
seeing
only
one
Super
twice.
Bowl that was shown on
NBC and CBS.
both because
Both
one of
had it.
them had the rights to the NFL and one of them had the rights to the AFL.
AFL. That's
Yep.
incredible.
Is that not
That's
amazing?
wild. So, and you know what? Now that I look at it too, they had different costs. So it was 37,500 for NBC and
Yeah.
42,500 for CBS.
The NFL was charging a premium.
Right, a
Yes.
lot more
And
expensive to
yeah,
get there.
NBC was the
That's
upstart with
wild.
the AFL. So yeah.
And then they alternated. So
And
then
then
from then
from
on,
that point
they went back and
forward,
forth. They
they
started alternating.
alternated.
It didn't break
Yes.
$100,000 for a 30-second spot until Super Bowl XLIX. So
Wow.
and
Wow.
then, you're talking about today. What do you think the cost is today? Do you know the cost?
I do. I've heard some estimates, and they were very. What has leaked out is like premium,
Hmm.
because it does get cheaper the further you go
Yeah.
along, because there's a peak audience. But I've heard the premium be about 8 million
Yeah.
bucks.
This has it listed as the average. So average cost being 7 million.
It's 7 million
But
because it is cheaper in certain areas of the game,
mhm.
and so that's why sometimes the later commercials are things you haven't heard of because they're taking a chance.
Yeah.
But if it's a good game, you're going to have more people watching at the end.
Same time,
So,
what's interesting, you look back at Super Bowl one and the two networks, they had a combined viewership of roughly 51 million.
yep,
So
yeah.
it was 24-4 on NBC and 26-7 on CBS. So combined 50. Super Bowl two dipped by like
Way down.
11 million. It was like 39 million, and it didn't start
So
to climb back up until 6 or 7.
So the funny thing about this though is their numbers are still, I think, a little fuzzy, because they had started doing viewership in the mid to late 60s, but
Hmm.
they were typically doing like Nielsen ratings or whatever, so they were estimating.
Yeah.
So when they shoot the first highlight film of Super Bowl one, John Facenda guessed that it was an audience of 65 million, the largest to ever watch a sporting event.
Okay.
And now that we look back on it and we have our adjusted numbers, we know what
Yep.
each one. It's closer to, like you say, about
The
50
50s.
million. Yeah.
But then again, you look at today, 115 was the average number of viewers in 2023 for the 2023 Super Bowl. 2024
Yeah.
obviously February, but um I wonder too. You think of obviously the global audience side of things
Yep.
impacts that. It, I always wonder how they count things like sports bars and the establishments
Yes.
around the country that
Yep.
have the game on in front of literally thousands of people,
Yes.
that are packed into those locations
How
and
do
the
they
sports
how do
books.
they get those?
Like, does
Because
that truly is that calculated into that? And if so, how? Right?
they're definitely, like, I've got a chart here that somebody put out, and it has in home versus out of home viewership,
There you go.
and it will act. But like, how are you getting the out of
Right.
home?
Right.
You have to estimate that so many people were in a certain area to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But um, so just for giggles, baseball guy here, we're going to talk ratings. Let's talk ratings.
Yeah.
Um, the 2023 in Vegas last year, Kansas City, San Francisco was the highest viewed sporting event ever over all platforms.
It jumped a lot too. Like if you
Yeah,
look at,
it's 123,
yeah.
almost 124 million over everything. That's
Mm-hmm.
their estimate of, you know. So for the first time in a while, the World Series had decent ratings with the Dodgers and Yankees being in it. The total number of viewers of the 5 games, 77 million
Still
viewers.
doesn't
And,
equal what,
and
yeah.
that's essentially
That's repeat view. You gotta imagine,
exactly,
right?
that's
So
counting the person
it's not
5 times
unique
almost.
viewers. It's
Not
not
unique
unique.
viewers.
So
Absolutely. It's amazing
that's just,
that.
it begs the question too of like, I know we still sort of nicely refer to baseball as America's pastime.
Yep,
I think that ship has sailed.
absolutely. Absolutely. Like, so the highest, I'm going to say the highest viewership of a World Series, I looked this up, was 1978. They averaged almost 45 million viewers a night
Yeah.
for like a 6 game series. Once again, same two teams,
Right. Hmm.
LA and New York. And I looked up in 1978, uh, which you can do 78 season, but if you do 78 game, was the 77 season, there was, , 80 million viewers that year to that game. So even the baseball was getting 45 million a night. The Super Bowl got 80
in
in
in the
in one.
70s.
Yes,
Like
in the 70s on three networks.
the
Yes,
other thing you have to account for there too is the fact that I mean it's a true thing. U.S. population at the time probably a
sure.
lot lower than what it was or what it is today.
Yeah,
So
they're
I mean,
showing a
like percentage
share of
of
almost 50% there of television viewers.
mm-hmm.
So
That's a strong number.
yeah, 47.2.
And then to the contrary, to the so looking at some of the things that slant back in its favor versus the other way, how many channels were there to choose from in the 70s as opposed to today?
Yeah,
So there's that.
unreal. But
Hmm.
yeah, so it's like it has become this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How
One of my favorite it's photographic evidence of and they do it every year. Photographic
yeah.
evidence of just how big the Super Bowl has become is the moment captured around the coin flip. If you look back at Super Bowl one, and we'll do a side by side,
Yeah,
and the just who's on the field for the coin flip at Super Bowl one, and it's the players and the ref. It's
right,
seven people
right,
total, and then you look at what it is, today, and it's the seven players or however many captains and the referee. But then you got the guest coin flipper, or
right,
if it's going to be more than one person, or just the horde of media that surrounds that moment in time. I don't
right.
think the people in the stadium, unless they're looking up at the board at whatever the broadcast channel is showing, um, I don't think you can see the people like in like the act of the coin flip happening. It's unbelievable because it is like I mean, it's gotten to the point where it looks like the fans that have rushed to the court around after a basketball game. Like there are just that many people. It's like five or six deep of media
Hmm.
around the coin flip. Um, and just
Yes.
watching that grow over time too, you could see sort of like how it expanded and just how big it got. Is one of the more interesting things. And I think, like I
Oh,
said, just shows how big the Super Bowl has become.
and to think you're just because it's a TV show,
Hmm.
now because it's
Production
not
around it,
necessarily
just
like a game, so the game is almost secondary to the other stuff.
right,
Um, like I've never been a huge pregame show guy,
right.
but there'll be like 12 hours of pregame for this,
Hmm.
and you're just like,
12 hours, my man. There's a whole week down in the Super Bowl city where they've got a
that's
media
you're
day.
right, you're right, you're right. But I'm talking about on the actual
Yeah, yeah.
game
It
day.
starts in the
They're going
morning.
to come on at 6 o'clock in the morning
Yep.
for pregame, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I will say the one thing that has helped. We talked about this as well. Is like in those early Super Bowls, none of them were very good. Um, you have this like 12. What did we come with? 12-year run that the NFC does.
Yeah. Yep.
There's one.
80s into the 90s. I think it was up until that Super Bowl 31.
Yes,
Then Elway ends the run.
Elway wins. Elway wins the. He ends
Is
it the
that first
next
game
year.
his helicopter tackle, his helicopter dive, or is it does he
I
do
think
that
it's the
against New England?
last. I
It's
think
his
it's the
last one. So
last
it's his
game.
second one. So that
Yes.
they beat Green Bay, and then
Drum
is it
roll. Da, 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 da,
New
da, da.
England?
Eh. Come on.
Who's the second one? Oh my God, I should know this.
So this team had beat one of the best teams ever 2 weeks earlier to get there. They were kind of a surprise.
It's gonna bother me, and now I have to look it up because I don't remember. And
They're a bird as well.
yep, they are, and they're the bird whose most recent Super Bowl is an infamous one for their collapse. so,
Exactly.
so
Yeah,
Atlanta,
it was
Atlanta.
Atlanta had beat a 15-1 Viking team
Okay.
that in the NFC Championship to get there. That's the whole
Yep.
Dirty Bird and
Yep.
Jamal
Yep.
and doing that's when the first time it shows up and yeah, and they go and get routed
They
in John Elway's
absolutely
last
do.
game. Yeah. Once
Um,
again, you have beautiful footage of that from NFL films with the
do the
spin.
slow
But
mo spin. It's like a just
yeah,
flat bodied helicopter right into the end zone.
but I can't, it seems like he was in all white, and it was like they had blue jerseys in the Super Bowl before. That's why I can't. I'm trying to
Hmm.
think I'm trying to use my NFL films knowledge, but like I say, I'm not as trustworthy post 31. But yeah, I just I want to think it was his last game that he
Yeah,
did this
it
crazy
was
helicopter. But
walking off the field. Um,
this one's for John.
yeah. Oh, there's some really quirky things I love about the Super Bowl.
Hmm.
One of it being, it's hosted in some like generally warm areas, right? Like
Hmm.
there's been, as we've discovered and looking back through time, if you've got a dome, Detroit has hosted one. Minneapolis has hosted I say one.
Detroit's
Detroit's
two.
hosted a couple. Minneapolis has hosted a couple.
Hmm.
The only weird one where it got dicey was New York. And,
Yep.
New York hosted one. But generally, you're in a warm environment. I think about some of the teams that are down in those warm environments and over time, and it's the LAs, the Tampa Bays, the
Hmm.
Miamis, New Orleans, even Superdome, right? But
Hmm.
they've got it. Not until Tampa Bay in 21, I think it was the Tampa Bay and KC Super Bowl,
Okay.
where Brady beats Mahomes. Did the host city have the host team in the Super Bowl?
Play
Because
in
I play
their
in their
home
home
stadium.
stadium in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And so that was the first time. It took 55 years, right? So
Yep.
like 55 Super Bowls for that to occur.
Yes.
And
And
then it happens back to back.
back
So,
to back.
right? So like just the
Yes.
quirkiness of something like that happening in the Super Bowl,
So
or not happening for that long is wild to me.
I will say this though, that is an accurate statement. But at Super Bowl 14, the Rams played in Pasadena, which not their home stadium,
Right.
but it was their city, which
Yeah.
was still
Pretty
weird
cool.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and granted, I would get killed by the California people that say that Pasadena's LA, but
Yeah, right.
UCLA plays
Right.
in Pasadena, so it's got to
They
be.
do.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
it's,
but that was the one of those like it had
it
never
never
been the
happened.
actual. Yeah, because like I think even 4 or 5 years later, San Francisco plays a Super Bowl in the Bay Area,
Yeah,
just not in Candlestick. They play at Stanford Stadium,
right.
which, if once again memory here, I think that's Dan Marino's only Super Bowl.
Appearance.
The
You
great
can't
Dan
say win.
Marino, he
Can't
did
say win
not
because,
win.
yeah,
He did
never
not
won
win.
one.
He makes one Super Bowl that he plays. It seemed like
Right.
he may be a rookie the year before because I think they made it back to back years or something like that.
Mhm.
It seemed like Washington beat him one year and then San Francisco maybe beat him or somewhere around it there.
I'm
But
not going to
Dan,
doubt you because I think you're
yeah.
right.
But it's if you go back and watch that one, the fog rolls in and
Yep.
but that's San Francisco's
It was
second.
not back to back. So
It's not back to back.
Washington beat them in
Yeah,
37, or I'm
then
sorry,
Washington,
17,
okay,
17
then Washington loses to the Raiders,
Raiders,
and
and then
then
comes
we come
back
back to Miami. Yes,
and San
because
Francisco beats them
because after that year they draft him, he's a rookie in that middle year, so
Mhm.
he is a second year player when they go to the Super Bowl
and
and
never makes it back.
never makes it back. It's crazy, man. It's
Um,
crazy.
right. And you think about some of those runs in Miami, they had a couple of opportunities to host as well during that run, like
They
up through the
did,
mid 90s, and like
yeah,
never made it to it. Like some of the opportunities for that to happen and it never happening
yeah.
is crazy. It's just crazy that it doesn't happen for 55 years.
Nope.
But I want to take that quirkiness down another path too, because with the expansiveness of the Super Bowl and how big it's become,
Yeah,
it's also alongside another topic that we've talked about on this podcast before, and that's sports betting.
sure.
You want to talk about obviously, there's the game itself that gets betted on, and
Mm-hmm.
player props and game lines and things like that. But there are some insanely hilarious and fun to follow. We'll call them just Super Bowl props because they're
Sure.
related to the fanfare around it. And they're out there, and I want to run through a couple and also get your thoughts on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and I'll give for those out there, I'll give some of the odds on it too because it may make sense to you. If it doesn't, just
Yeah.
fast forward over it. But one of my early favorite ones is will a player or coach cry during the national anthem?
Oh,
And all I can think
nice.
back to is Sirianni during the previous 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Just the tear, like he's just standing there and the tear just streams down his face, which I know has happened before, but like I obviously being a Philly fan, the odds on that are minus 430. So that's pretty solid odds for it to happen.
It's going to
And
happen.
get it like it's going to happen. And someone will catch it on TV or someone will catch it with a
Nice.
camera. I would be interested, and I don't know if there's a an actual individual odd on this, but like what his odds are versus like who's most
There you
likely to
go.
cry versus
Individual
who's
criers.
least
Yes.
likely to cry.
That's
so
great.
so he's in there. I would imagine he would be if it's minus 430 for someone to cry, his would be like double that because he's absolutely going to. Just knowing how emotional he is.
Yeah.
There's a proposal odd as well, a proposal
Oh,
prop. So,
okay.
I have to imagine you'd probably have to parlay this with like if Kansas City wins, does Travis propose to Taylor? So that's on there.
Ah.
Right now they have it as plus 500 for him to propose. So it's,
Okay.
odds are against you. They think it's not going to happen. But, see what happens in the game. Maybe it does.
Sure.
That'd be a moment, right?
That would be. Wow.
But halftime show, there's always halftime show props, like what guests come out.
Sure.
You'll appreciate this one. So 2012 was the last time that New Orleans hosted a Super Bowl, or
Yeah.
correct? Do you remember an infamous moment that happened during that game?
Of course.
It
Yeah, the
was the
power
Harbaugh
went.
Bowl,
The Harbaugh
but
Bowl and the power goes out in the middle of this game.
it does.
They blow something.
And it was
Um,
like wasn't it like a 30-minute stoppage too? Because they had to
I think
recycle the
it's I
lights
think it's
longer than that.
longer than that.
Then they pulled them off the field and went back into
They did
the
and
locker
then
rooms.
I think they even warmed them up again because it was so
That's right.
long.
That's right. Um,
Yes, because so I
34
was
minutes. There it is. It's actually in here.
34
So I'm able to
34
read
minutes.
that because there is a prop on whether the power will go out.
If the power goes out.
Right. And it is right now it's plus 1600 for it to happen. And so they're betting against it happening again. I have to imagine knowing
Well,
that happened last time, they are doing everything in their that they're capable of to ensure that it doesn't
it
happen.
would have been plus 10,000 the first time.
Right.
And then
It
now
still
it's
happened.
plus
It's
1600.
actually right. It's actually
Yeah.
a slightly better
Yeah.
odds that it will
Yeah.
happen. But
So, but
no, those are some of the wacky others that that are always out there that get talked about a lot are things like the coin flip. Is it going to be heads or
yep.
tails? I think tails is on quite a run. Or it's like one of the it's supposed to be 50-50, right? But like it's always
Right.
the tails never fails idea. Um, that tends to win. And then of course the color of the Gatorade bath is a popular prop.
That's a good. Oh wow.
And
Haven't heard
then
that one.
the national anthem is always involved as well. The over under
Like
of
the
like how
time.
long it takes.
Yeah.
And I was watching I think it was like First Take this morning or Sports Center, and they were on actually talking about this. And the guy that was talking about it from that covers some ESPN bet stuff was saying that you gotta take what information you can around stuff like that for these silly props. One
Yeah.
of which is you'll actually see reports come out in the run up to the Super Bowl of whoever it is this year. I'm not sure who's singing it, but there will be dry runs. Like they'll have sound
Rehearsals.
checks and
Yeah.
rehearsals
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And the timestamps for the rehearsals will get released. Like they'll practice it 3 or 4 times. So like
Uh-huh.
they did it a couple years ago. Last year, the timestamps for the rehearsals were like minute 53, minute 53, minute 54. Day of the
Uh-huh.
Super Bowl comes, it hit a minute 53, so like it went under. So
Wow.
there are things out there. That's how wild it's become with the Super Bowl is that there are props on things like this, and I mean they make and lose people money. So
That's incredible. Yeah.
it's wild.
When I was a kid, it's been there my whole life, but it was still, I was born in 73 or whatever. So they'd had 6 at that point in time. So it was not what it was going to become. But if you were born in the late 80s, the last 30 of them have been
I've
huge, massive.
I've known nothing else other
Nothing
than
else of the craziness of halftime shows and wacky commercials and all
which
the
we
stuff.
haven't
And
even talked about the halftime show and what that's become.
Yes, like I say, I'm old school. I want some up with people. I don't need any
If
of
we
this
go
modern
back and
stuff.
count, they might be the most used entertainment.
Yeah, what's the trivia question? Who has done the halftime show the most? Is anybody kind of come up with up
Up
with
with
people?
people.
What a name, man.
Right. I
I
mean,
got the new up. I would have loved to have been able to put an
yeah.
album of up with people up
Oh,
behind me, but
that is so
yeah,
good.
no, I don't even have that. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean,
But
we dove through it, and I mean, it was for the first dozen or so years, and more
march
so, even more than that.
marching bands or
A lot of
something like
marching
that.
bands, college marching bands, and tribute bands or like just appearances, but not really that. Um, kind of what it's become. Like the Apple
Right.
Music now, it's Apple Music, but I mean, the first, if I remember right, the first like produced halftime show that we saw
Yeah.
uh, was put on by um, the Walt Disney Company,
Yeah.
and it had the L.A. Unified All City Band with the Mouseketeers, and there was
Right.
an audience like magic trick card stunt type thing, and that was Super
Something.
Bowl 11.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
then
I mean,
we had Diet Coke finally being a
yeah,
sponsor
they
of
they were one
the.
of the. Actually, I could have been wrong earlier. Carnival, so I'm
Oh,
imagining that's
gotcha.
they sponsored Super Bowl 13,
Gotcha.
which was Ken Hamilton, various Caribbean bands. So probably one of their like on ship entertainment
Gotcha.
groups that were brought in to do the halftime show.
Our
But
carnival is sponsored by Carnival with our
immediate
carnival workers here,
immediately followed up by Up
Yes.
with People the next year in Grambling State University
Up
marching
with
band.
people, baby.
But yeah, that Diet Coke one becomes one of the first major ones. Elvis Presto and the
Yeah.
South
That
Florida area dancers and performers.
just sounds
Sounds like a
crazy.
Elvis Presley like tribute
Yeah, do
individual.
it.
Like
It's
I don't even know.
like,
Um,
oh, well, I'm playing, the local, casino here on Saturday night, but Sunday I got the Super Bowl.
right. But it is, I mean, truthfully, it is not until the 90s. And,
Right.
it's 25, you get Walt Disney and Coke come back in to sponsor a New Kids on the Block performance. And that's followed up by Gloria Estefan with figure skaters and all sorts of things around the 1980 Olympic team gets honored and stuff like that. But
Okay.
the following year is when
Hmm.
we truthfully get what we've agreed on is probably our first true halftime show, a true modern halftime show. And it's Michael Jackson, the other goat, the other
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
in Super Bowl 27 at the Rose Bowl, and woohoo,
Woo-hoo.
doing his whole
Good
thing.
stuff.
So
Yeah.
that is
Do you
that is it, 1993.
do you have any that you think about, like you stand out? I mean, is that something that even care about?
I did
I
like to me. One of the things I don't understand about the modern Super Bowl is how hard people are on the halftime show.
sure.
There's like more recently you get like the weekend, and I know this year's Kendrick Lamar, and um, a couple years ago, like they've all been great to me. They're entertaining to me, and
Gotcha.
you're asking these entertainers to do a lot within a probably 10 to 15-minute window. And
Right.
you've got all these like guest appearances that get rolled into it as well. And, I think of like Snoop Dogg had Eminem and all these other people when it was at Inglewood and in that stadium. And, I find them to be very entertaining. And, I always, for better or for worse, will end up opening up Twitter to look at the conversation that's happening around it and see
Hmm.
people just like bash the Black Eyed Peas when they were on, or bash Maroon 5 when they were on, um, bash Justin Timberlake when he was on. And I'm like,
Right.
how are what do you want? Like, you're not going to be able to make everyone happy because when you're talking about 110 million people watching this thing, not 110 million people, try to get 110 million people to agree on one concert to go to,
No.
and you're not going to be able to. So like I enjoy them all. I guess it may have more to do with my sort of broad musical
Sure.
taste. Like
Yeah.
I don't. We've had this conversation in past episodes around like my my iTunes collection or music collection is very broad. Like
Yes.
it may have stopped evolving after high school and like be stuck
Right.
in sort of the emo rock era, but like I could get by listening to country. I can get by listening to rap. I can get by listening to pop. I can get by
Yeah,
listening to just about anything and be okay with it. So I am do any stick out? I mean, maybe JT because it was during the Super Bowl that the Eagles won, and that's why the
right.
wife was very invested in watching it as well.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that sticks out. Another JT one sticks out for a very
Oh,
specific cover up reason, but
yeah.
there's that.
That's a Panther Super
It
Bowl. That's right there.
right right there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I they're just entertaining to me. That's all.
Yep. Here's my take. Here's the old man take on the Super Bowl halftime show is it's not for you.
No,
It's for someone who typically doesn't watch the game.
right, right.
And if they said there's going to be, I don't know, figure skating in the halftime show, you wouldn't care. You'd still watch the game. It's not for you or me or a football fan. That's how I always look at it because it just
It's the
my
same,
my 50-year-old friends are go, I don't know who this is. And it's like because it ain't for you.
right? It
You're
didn't
you're gonna
wasn't
watch it
Bruce in
anyway.
the halftime show not too long ago?
It's
Springsteen at some
probably
point, like I think he
probably
had one. Aerosmith and NSYNC where they like tried to
yeah
merge the generations, I guess. That could be a
yeah
Twisted Era's halftime show right
sure.
there, right? You think of some of
But
those, like it's just they try things. The Stones have done it. Like
yeah.
yeah, Bruce was in '09. So
But seriously, I mean, go listen to Up with People and see if you can make it 5 seconds. And it didn't matter. There was
right.
still half the country watching.
The Who were
Yeah,
on there. Like it's
yeah.
just
It doesn't matter. And that's
no.
you're gonna get to an age where I don't know who this person is who's the halftime entertainment. I don't know who that is. I don't care. It's not like that would
And
change the
it's
fact that you know what? I don't know who the halftime entertainment
that
is.
game was terrible. Like, are
I'm
you
not going to
really
watch this game.
are you coming out of it thinking that the game was terrible because of the halftime
Come
show?
on.
It's this
Yeah.
honestly, it's the same conversation as the commercials. Like some people will watch
Right.
for the commercials, some will watch for the halftime show.
Right.
Most are watching for the game of football that's being played
Exactly.
on the field.
But to be honest, if we were just watching the game, you may get 75 million people to watch it because it's a big game. The
Hmm.
other 50 are probably out there for other reasons, and that's fine
Yeah,
because that's you're trying to get eyeballs. But I will say this: there are two that stand out to me, and I'm a huge Prince fan. I love him to death. He is in the Colts,
hmm
uh, Bears, I believe, when it rains. There's
yeah,
very I think there's only
it's iconic. It was
one
very
raining
iconic.
Super Bowl. There's one early that it rains. The field's kind of muddy, but I don't think it rained during the game, and it rains that whole game.
It was
And
ugly.
and there's this great story about when the guy came to him, it's like, hey, Prince, we're going to be out in 5 minutes, and I hate to tell you this, but it's raining. I don't know if there's anything we can do for you. And he says, make it rain harder. And it's like this iconic line of here we go, man. And he went
Hmm.
out there, and it is real. You can tell as a guitar player, you can tell because it's a little wonky, because it's
Yeah,
weird to play in the rain. You typically do not. So that one definitely stands out. And the other one, just I've got my Metallica stuff up here, but I got
heck yeah,
my
yeah,
U2 stuff as well. And U2 is probably my favorite band. And U2 was chosen to play randomly for the 2001 season / 2002 Super Bowl
yep,
that no one knew was delayed. I'm pretty sure that one's New Orleans as well.
right,
And he does this iconic, intro to Where the Streets Have No Names, and they roll every name that we lost that day in
yeah,
9/11. And he opens the coat, and it's got the American flag in there. I mean,
yep,
that thing is iconic. It's just amazing. So
man,
I don't sit there and granted, I was 27. I was that was still I still listened to popular music then, and so that's more relevant. But we get
yeah,
to the day, I don't care who the halftime show is. It really doesn't mean anything to me.
right.
It's not for me anymore. So
No,
that's that's how I look at it. I literally anything. Once again, they had Up with People for like 4 times. People Up with
it could
People.
be it could be a
Is that
lot
what you
worse.
want?
It
Would
could be
you
a
rather?
lot worse. Let me
Would you
tell you.
rather this modern artist not play and we bring out Up with People?
Right. I or the other side of it too. I think of the ladies that watched back in 2020, and it was Shakira and J Lo,
Oh,
and Bad Bunny was in. I thought there was a third lady. No, no, it was just those two. It was those two. They rocked it together and they split it. And just I remember people going off about how I say off. They were excited about how like great J Lo looked for. I think she's 50 at the time, or like
yeah.
so like the shape they both were in for how advanced they are in their careers, and they're
Sure.
still able to rock a halftime show. And even more recently, like Rihanna had it 2 years ago, um, and was doing
Again.
this platform thing, and like opens up her coat and shows off that she's pregnant doing the halftime show, right? So like,
Wow.
I think of some of those moments too, where it's like, it's clearly not about you. Like
Not
it's about the performers and giving them a chance and a stage and
exactly.
entertaining some
Exactly.
people.
And the other beautiful thing in the modern world we live in is there are options that you don't have to watch it. There
Right.
are other channels that will literally show something special during halftime that has the clock up there, so
Right.
you know what?
How much
I
time's left?
I don't know this person. I have
Listen,
nothing against them, but you know what? It's pretty funny. We're gonna go watch puppies play in a
right. Go take
in
go take
yeah.
the chance. Go watch something else. Go take your bathroom break. Go
Exactly.
refill your drink.
Whatever.
Go have snacks. Like go refill your
Yeah.
plate. Like do something. You
Do
can
some. Come on.
old man yell at cloud.
Exactly. Old man yelling at clouds. So, um, but
Oh,
I'm trying to. I think we hit ads. We hit economics. The whole idea. We hit halftime shows. The game. The numbers.
mm.
How it is just. We've had a lot of things, but I don't know if you want to bring it home with
Do we
what
tell?
you
We don't. My feelings on the eras or my
yeah.
feelings on this year's game, because I don't
Well,
want to. I have very, very specifically not talked about this year's game and my thoughts on it for
I
certain
think
reasons.
I was going more about the eras. I don't want you to talk
Good.
about this so it'll live forever in case something good or bad happens.
You've been knock. Is that thing real wood behind you? Because I might need you to stand up and go knock on it.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
there's
you
we could
know,
talk about
yeah.
superstitions at
So
some other point
go.
because this is we don't want to encapsulate things, but
Notice that the title of this is Super Bowl, not Super Bowl 59.
correct. So let's go into the eras of Super
Yeah.
Bowls, and I think there's to me there's the historical aspect of loving the history of the game.
Hmm.
And when I say the game, it's not just football, the game, but like the game, the big game, if you will. Um,
Don't get
so,
sued.
right. Yeah, am I allowed to call this episode the Super Bowl
I
episode,
have.
or like we're not
Are we
sponsored, we're
gonna
not getting paid,
misspell Super
right?
Bowl? We'll spell it
I'll
with
use
an E,
emojis and start using the dollar sign. Uh,
BOWEL, or something like that.
but so when we're talking about the big game, you know, the history of it is awesome. But to the point you made a little bit ago, like I only know the Super Bowl as this super phenomenal
Right.
uh, thing that gets just absolutely blown out of proportion and taken to another level. And you see snack sales go above and beyond what they are, and the food aspect of
Wings
it, and the
and
wings and hot dogs,
guacamole.
and right,
Yeah.
right. Those numbers that continue to exceed themselves year over year. But there's also like I think about the more recent eras of like the get-togethers, and it's almost like another holiday.
It has
The
become
way
a holiday. Yep.
you know
You're right.
we don't get Monday off, which I'm still we'll get there at some point. I think it'll be a
Some point.
national holiday.
Yeah.
But I've experienced some things in this modern era of the Super Bowl where the entertainment side of it to me is cool. The watching on multiple screens, it's an experience, and I can't imagine having to pick between two channels to watch or, right? Like just what it was to what it is. And, I think for me it's today. Like I
Hmm.
can't think it being any better than what despite all of the pomp and circumstance, there is so much to enjoy in it and about it that I just have to go with today.
No, it's fair. It's fair. Like I said, those first 30, 31, I can give you details. I think I've proven that in the episode that I can pop off some random facts. And this is from a kid who did not even have a team
Right.
until Super Bowl 31 is the first Super Bowl 30. I think we play that season, but I think 31 is the first one. We get beat by Green Bay in that
Mm-hmm.
NFC Championship game. So I didn't even have a team growing up as a kid, and I can name off all these crazy things. So, knowing so much about it because of NFL films, because of ESPN. ESPN needed to fill time, and they would put all these great highlight shows. The Panthers have been in two, 38, and we got beat by Brady. And 50 where
It was
Cam,
a slobber knocker.
well, we got beat late bad, but Cam fumbled the ball and didn't jump on it,
Right.
and then Peyton drives it in. And anyway, that was not good either. But I'm just not as big a football fan today as I was when I was a kid. There's just I don't even know what you could say. It's on too much. They have oversaturated the product. And, I heard somebody describe it like cake. Yeah, it'd be great to eat in a giant cake, but it would make you sick. So you eat a slice of cake, and you eat a slice of cake once a week, which was amazing back in the day. I mean, on the last day of the year, when they have all the games together on Sunday, and there is no Monday night game, and it's incredible to have all that. What used to be like that
Yep.
every week, and now
Yeah.
you have Thursday, and now you have Sunday night, and now you have Monday night, and now you have Tuesday because it was on Christmas Eve or whatever it is, and you're like,
Right.
dude, the product has just become oversaturated. That like again, that's just me,
I hear it. I get it.
old man yelling at clouds. But as far as the Super Bowl, it happened in my time. I get it that it had
Hmm.
transitioned into other things. But the game is now almost the second part of the experience. It's like all the other stuff that, like say, halftime entertainment. What's the best commercials? And this is what's so funny about us. It's like this is the only day of the year we care about this because the rest of the time we want DVR and we want TiVo and we want skip commercials. And you may have been served a commercial because you're watching on YouTube and you're trying to skip it. But this one day out of the year, we care more about commercials than any other time. It's
Hmm.
crazy. And on the next
Yeah.
day, you're going to talk about what's your favorite, but it's not like you're going to go buy that product. It's like, you're just going to talk about it. It makes no sense to me. Like, we hate commercials as a society,
Uh-huh.
literally hate. We have literally built things to get around commercials, except for on this one
Hey,
day.
there are those that will watch it and be sitting there with the FCC webpage open, ready to file their complaints.
Got to file some
That's
complaints.
one of my favorite pastimes of the day after the Super Bowl is to go look at the complaints that have been filed because
Yes.
there are some wild ones. Like you're
Oh, I
really,
imagine.
you talk about I hate to bring up the Karens and Kevins of the world, but like that is the day that they go off.
That's
It's the day
that's
after the
the
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl Monday for them, huh?
Yeah. Those are some fun things to
So
go through.
with all that to be
Yeah.
said, it's a weird thing because I
Yeah.
think the games are better now.
The
They've
football is
been
better now.
the football
Yeah.
is better now. The games have been closer than when it were. We didn't have any good games when I'm growing up. I mean, they're terrible. The first one I remember that's any good is Super Bowl 23, and that's Joe Montana has 3 minutes on the clock, and he drives them down the field to beat Cincinnati. And, now Patrick Mahomes has 18 seconds and he can drive them down. It was just a different game back then. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like I'm torn because I think my era is way better. I just do.
Yeah.
We had Joe Montana, we had, all those guys, but I believe the game is technically better today to watch. I think the games are typically closer. We don't have the blowouts like we had. There's a game, I think it's Super Bowl 24, where the Niners win. They score 50 points on Denver. It is
55 to
ridiculous.
10.
55-10. I mean, who cares about that, right?
Right.
And so I'm torn. I'm going to say my era for the actual everything, but for the quality of the game, it's today. The games are just better.
Yeah.
We didn't have any overtime games. We didn't have any,
That was
all that
another
stuff.
one. I
Yeah.
mentioned the quirks about the Super Bowl. That
Yeah.
that New England Atlanta one,
Yeah.
the comeback. That's the first overtime Super Bowl
First overtime
in
Super Bowl.
2017, like the
Yeah.
2016 season. And
And I want to say five was going to go to overtime. There's a last second field goal, but they combined for like 10 turnovers. It's ridiculous when you go back and
yep,
try to watch it. The gameplay is
terrible.
terrible. It just
Yeah.
so happened to end on a last second field goal. But
I'm running through to your point about the scores and things like
yeah,
that. The last blow, you can call it a blowout. 55 was a blowout with crazy enough, it was Brady and Mahomes, and it was 31-9. Brady beat
yeah,
Mahomes.
yeah.
Prior to that, the last terrible game I remember,
Oh
um,
yeah,
43, I think. 50, I'm sorry, 53, because it was the Rams and Brady, um, which on paper should have been a phenomenal game. and
Yeah.
it ends up being, I remember being like 9-3 real later, like a 10-3 really
It
late, and
was
it
horrible.
was
I don't think they
god
had
awful
scored at the
football.
half, right?
No, it was
It's
nothing. It was like 3-0 or
it's
nothing
it's
nothing, and
there was
it
one that was,
was terrible.
I think Super Bowl 9 is 2-0 at the half.
Yep.
But I think they were 0-0. Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah.
But I will say there is a route, the New York one with Denver and
And
Seattle,
that's the one I was going back to. That was the last like serious. Just it was over from the get go.
right from the
Um,
get-go.
because that's the
And that,
Wilson had the pass go or the snap go over his head. Was it
right
Wilson? No,
there,
no, no, no. I'm sorry. It was the other way around.
the other
Because
way
Manning
around,
had the
they
snap, and it was like, oh,
blew.
this is going to be
Yeah,
good. And then by
Manning had
halftime, it was over.
Manning had thrown 50 some
Yeah,
touchdowns and they got routed.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
before that, it's like farthest differential is a two-score game, New
Yep.
Orleans and Indy
And
in
and sometimes those
2010.
two
But
score
like
games are at the end.
they're right. It's not like it's that bad. There's
Right.
Tampa Bay and Oakland in '03 was 48-21,
But
34-7 with Baltimore and New York.
Oakland got routed early in that game and then came back and made it close. And Tampa scores
Pulls
I
away.
think they scored a touchdown and then I think they get a pick six or something
Yeah.
like that to make it
But like
really
these
bad.
really aren't terrible games.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Crazy.
it's actually been good as opposed to some of the crap we had to sit through. But the
Yeah. You
Bears
look at the last three,
46-10 and
the last three have all been one-score games,
yeah.
and one of
Look at
which went to overtime.
2022 is Washington. I think they win 42-14, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah, it's a 42-point run. They
42 to
fell
10.
down
Yeah.
42-10. They fell down 10-0 and then ran off 42 straight points.
Jeez. Wild,
So
man.
that's what I'm saying. I like my era for it being more about the game,
Yeah.
but I think the actual game today is better. So it's
No.
a 50-50 one for me.
It's awesome. And yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't think you can get, this is one of those things. I don't think you could go wrong
Mhm.
in any era. But it's just,
I will
you cannot deny how big it's become.
Right. And I will say it's funny. You have some time. Maybe we can put the link out there. All those original highlights are there with John Facenda talking about Super Bowl I. It's wild. Some of these, and granted, the game is a little different now.
Yeah.
They're much more athletic than they were
Yep.
back then, but it was still good football back then.
Mhm.
Just not,
Right.
it's not as entertaining or exciting. I'm not saying it's still entertaining, but
In a different way. It's
Exactly.
entertaining in a different way.
exactly, so
Caters
but
to it has to cater to a wider audience. And
I'm trying not to say anything about anything because I don't want to say anything about something that may happen this Sunday. So that's why I wasn't gonna, I about said somebody's name, and I'm not going to say anybody's name.
I
but,
appreciate you doing that.
So,
Maybe
that's
we
why
can
I-
follow this up after the fact with how
Maybe.
did you, how do you handle the Super Bowl hangover?
Right. That's why I was stumbling with my words because
Right.
I was talking about you see the great Packers sweep from 1967 with the
Oh.
pulling lineman is beautiful, and I was about to say something about today being a
Yeah,
different, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna hold my tongue here. I'm not gonna say anything.
I appreciate that. Well, on that note, before we do say something that we're
Yep.
going to regret,
That's right.
let's hang it up and call it a day. But of course, we'd love your feedback on
Absolutely.
Your favorite
What's your-
Super Bowl era.
Yeah,
What's your
memory,
favorite Super Bowl?
commercial, all that good stuff. Yeah,
There are lots to consider when it comes to the Super Bowl today and your likes and dislikes. So be sure to share it all with us and let us know your thoughts. So, but until next time, until next Super Bowl, until next episode, right? Keep it twisted.